and put a little sustenance in because, of course, at that point, Molly's like, well, it's just 10 more miles for the day or maybe 11. And I was like, what? 11? Yeah, and like 3,000 feet of gain. I'm like, oh. Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
It may feel like we're many, many, many days deep into this podcast, but this is technically just day 4 of our time on this trail. Good news, there was only one more day after this, and it was a very short day.
And people have been asking us, how many more days are you going to be on this trail? Well, guess what? There's so many things that happened that we kind of needed to split days into multiple podcasts to just give you so many of the details.
In some ways, I'm still on that trail. I'm just kidding.
Honestly,
so this day, we already
in fact, parts of you are probably still on that trail after the bushwhack.
You're going to miss this. Anyway, so, well, honestly, it's probably been also burned up.
I'm thinking of your
but,
blood, sweat, and
oh,
tears.
well, that's true. That's still all there. So we were all happy at that morning. I mean, I'd obviously had my blue bag trauma that you may remember, and I'd prevented Molly from ever experiencing anything like that, and she's probably eternally grateful.
Yes.
But then the next thing that happened was we had to leave. And I think we said it was about 11 a.m. when we...
I was going back to Rachel making the peace sign at 11 a.m. Yeah. When we talked to Ranger Shelvin and we went over our itinerary, he was looking at, our campsite, which was is it called Boundary Camp? Mm-hmm. On our way out. And he was like, oh, that's going to be a really tough slog to get to Boundary Camp. And I was like, I don't know what he's talking about. But okay, because when we were looking at this day, I'm sorry, Carrie, I guess I didn't plan as thoroughly as I should have, but we were under the impression because we were starting at Tapto Lakes, which was a high point of our trip, that we would basically have a downhill journey. So we were like, yeah, we can leave late because we're just going to be rolling downhill all day.
Yeah, so that did not happen, as you'll find out. But we started out the day in relatively good spirits. Everything was beautiful. The sun was shining. A little breeze perhaps played over the surface of the earth. Anyway, so we kind of started our descent. And at first it was really quite straightforward because we had come down there the day before. So, there's that tiny bit of ascent and then a little bit of descent and got to stop for photos because everything's so pretty. And then, of course, on the climbers trail, there's a little bit of veg belaying, which is what we call it when you use the vegetation as a sort of belay or something to help you lower yourself without falling. And there, I was looking at some videos. There's a little bit of down climbing, nothing that's too crazy, but things that do take a little bit of time, especially when you have weight on your back. Yeah. So we were kind of just making our way out of there really slowly.
And I remember too, I had to take all these glimpses of, Challenger across the way from us because the glacier is just so magnificent. And I was just like, oh, I need to just soak in this visual as much as I can because I knew we were going to be leaving.
And honestly, I feel like the thing that's so fun about glaciers is how blue they are, some spots on them. And there was one at the very bottom, like where the glacier kind of is on a cliff, basically, before it pours out in this waterfall where it's just like super heavily crevassed and you can just see that beautiful glacier blue color. And yeah, it was just so stunning. It's like one of those spots where you just want to stay there forever and just really take in everything around you.
Is the blue Gatorade called Glacier Blue?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there you go.
Yep. And that is why today's lesson, the more you know. So we got down to Whatcom Pass, and honestly, I didn't feel like I needed to stay there very long because we had been at the more beautiful place, in my opinion, which was Tapto, which is like higher, so the view is better. But there was one thing that Shelvin had told us that we could do. He said that we could, and this is specific to this area, a lot of places say never do this, but we were told that we could do this by a ranger. He was like, oh, you can just dump the contents of your blue bag into the vault toilet and
composting
toilet. And honestly, I don't know who was the first one to go up to the
I think it was me, and It was the same thing as the day before. The closer you got to it, there was this horrible stench. And I opened the lid and it looked like a million people had tried to dump their blue bags, but all of it had gone onto the seat and nothing had made it into the hole. And it was either dump it in there or carry it for, the next 48 hours. So I think we all dumped it in, right? No?
So you came back and you were like, that is so disgusting. Maybe you tried to even dump it, but it just makes it worse because it was like sticking to the bag. And I think that everyone at a certain point just looked at each other and we were like, well, we're carrying the bag either way. Yeah. So let's not make this such a disgusting mess where it's like smeared all over it, and let's just carry it.
And did we do like a survival style like meeting of the members of our group to decide who was going to carry the blue bags, or how did that go on, Carrie?
Oh, I'm pretty sure you just volunteered.
Oh, did I really?
I think so.
I think I might have. Oh, I don't know. I have no memory. My brain has been wiped.
To be honest, I think you were just so happy that I had such a terrible experience that morning and you'd had such a good one. You were like, well, I've already had such a good day today and it's just such a wonderful experience with my blue bag that I guess I'll just carry them because why not?
And it turns out I thought it was going to be stinkier to be the one carrying the blue bag, but actually it's worse for the person behind you because inevitably it gasses off.
If you've ever heard the term downwind, that would be referring to when you're behind the person with the poop bags.
So in the end, I think I actually lucked out by carrying them because everyone walking behind me had a harder time anyways.
And to be honest, I think that we cleared out your pocket of some items because we were like, whoever has the poop bags, we don't want those to like touch all of our stuff. So I think that the goal of one person having the poop bag was like just one person smelled like poop. No, was just that it was literally not touching like anything. It was just poop in one bag and everything else in the others.
Anything else but poop today, Carrie, or do you have anything else on the agenda?
No, that's all we have for you today. Just kidding, guys. This was a really long day. Honestly, this day was probably the most definition of the term pain cave I've ever experienced in my life. So we'll get to that later.
What's a pain cave?
The pain cave is something that we're going to talk about later. I'm just kidding. No, the pain cave is like people will talk about when they're runners or athletes where you're just like, you just keep going because you have to, but you're honestly just like really suffering, but you're also kind of in a place in your mind where you're like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to get through it. I'm going to finish this. But you're also really suffering. I don't know if you have a better definition.
No,
okay, yeah, that's all.
I think I was in the pain cave when I was trying to dump my blue bag into the toilet.
So, and that's why she was so happy to just carry them. She could exit the pain cave right away. So then you descend from Whatcom Pass, and I mean, it was really hot that day. I think that it was getting hotter and hotter. And so we were just kind of making our way down. And honestly, like in some ways the descent it's funny because everybody's different. I've seen people saying recently, like, the descent is so much harder on your body than the ascent. Da, 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 da. I'm like, well, for me, that's almost never true. Maybe someday it will be, but usually the descent, I have my momentum. But here I feel like there was enough little like weird creeks that you have to cross. And there was that one that you had to kind of step across the rocks if you don't want to get your feet wet. And it was probably like a 4-foot drop, which is not that big of a deal if you don't care about getting your feet wet. So it was kind of like, I think we were just moving slow because it's the North Cascades. It's difficult terrain. So it honestly took us like 4 hours to even get down to Graybeal again. Yeah. Which is so crazy. I was looking at that today. It was like 5 miles in 4 hours. No, it's 4 miles in like 4 hours. And we're like, well, that's not a problem. So then, of course, we get to Graybeal.
As Carrie said, we arrived at Graybeal. And I remember, as we were hiking down to it, that we weren't making good time and we had left a little later than we should have. But I kept thinking, well, it took us 30 minutes to find our way from the part where the trail was washed out on one side to where we could connect with the trail on the other side. But now we know where we're going. So we're going to get a bonus 30 minutes that we didn't have the day before. So everything will be okay. Typical golden retriever mindset, glass is half full style.
Mm-hmm. So actually, I remember this. As we were going down, there was a guy who was coming up and he was just like really not enjoying himself. He was like, I'm trying to find a campsite at Graybeal. I can't find it anywhere. And we would actually see him the next day and he had just bailed because he was like, I'm getting blisters. It's too hot. Everything just takes so long. But we saw that guy. So then we get to Graybeal and we're like, okay, we're going to cross this little creek kind of in the same spot where we crossed it. So we crossed the creek and, it's actually got a really fast current when you watch the videos. It's very shallow. So, I mean, I never felt uncomfortable at all. Like, I feel like we didn't even really have to look where to cross, But we still were practicing our little techniques and like filming each other like la la la. It's just gonna be so easy to get through Graybeal. And then you pop out onto that sandbar and it's crazy because it's just kind of disorienting. But we were like, no, like we're confident. This is kind of the map and we kind of recognize these landmarks. And so you're walking across this jumble of trees and sand and trees and sand, and we were making decent time. And then we get to this like riverbed, and there's all this Devil's Club kind of beside it. And we're looking around because we're like, well, we know that this isn't right. This just does not look right. So we're like, okay, well, let's just go up and down the riverbank. So we kind of go up and down and nothing looks right. And we're like, okay, we must have gone to like totally the wrong spot. So let's find our way back. So we spend all this time finding our way back. And then we get back to the other point and we're like, okay, well, let's actually just cross over the river and let's just take the original continuation of the trail to where it washes out. And then we'll just cross, like, then we'll just go there and we'll cross there. So we take it to like the end, but then of course that ending point of the trail ends in just this crazy cliff, like that to climb down that. I mean,
you couldn't climb down it.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's a route that could provide ample belay, but it was just like not a good choice. Then of course we have to backtrack. So then we're like, okay, cross the river again. It's like at that point, it's like, you gone over it once, you gone back. You gone over it again, you're going back. So we cross that little creek again and we're like, okay, we're going to try a different route to get there.
And all without ever taking our shoes off. So at this point, our feet have been soaking wet for, I don't know, maybe at this point it's been 40 minutes that we've been wandering?
And not only soaking wet, they're also sandy. You know what I mean? And it's like, obviously we're in a place with not that great of GPS service, but we kind of knew our landmarks. So then we kind of orient ourselves and we're like, well, that's where we went last time. So surely that can't be correct. So we go a slightly different way and we get to like basically a slightly different point of the river. And we're like, well, this still isn't right. So we go back to where we were before. And I remember at this point, I kind of took stock of myself and I was like, okay, I've been in very exposed sun. It's sandy. I'm hot. I haven't eaten in hours. I'm thirsty and I'm not really thinking my best or like making my best decisions right now. So I think I finally just said like, okay, Molly and Rachel, like, I don't know about you guys, but I just have to sit down and I have to have a snack because right now I think I'm just going to be like anger marching across this desert for the next 40 years and never able to like think things through fully. So we all just kind of sat down, had some applesauce. I don't think Molly even sat because I think you were kind of agitated, like, we got to get a move on it. And honestly, after that, I was like, okay, I feel like my brain's working a little better. And so then we were like, okay, let's just try going the way we went the first time. So well,
before that happened, we saw this guy. So we were like, I think it was maybe after we rested, we went back to the river we had crossed 4 times already, one more time. And this guy was actually crossing on a tree that was laying across the river. And I think that he was going up to Whatcom Pass that day. And so we were like, hey, like, at what point do we get back in junction with the trail that was washed out? And he was like, I can't really describe it to you. And then he had Strava on his phone running and he like showed it to us. But it also, I think I took a picture of his phone or something with Strava, but it also didn't make any helpful sense because it just was his like GPS track kind of bouncing around. And I remember thinking, why did I not make a point of interest on my watch or on like our Garmin where we were going to cross the river? Because then we would know exactly where we were navigating to versus like a little bit of overconfidence leading to, at this point, you know, a good hour and a half of wandering in Graybeal.
So we finally had made it that far and we met him and visited. And then we decided to go back kind of the first way that we went because we felt so confident. And we ended up, of course, at the exact same point, and I started feeling frustrated, like, okay, let's just bushwhack, I guess, downriver. Like, yeah, it's going to be Devil's Club. It's going to be miserable, but why do we just keep going back and forth? Like, we know the direction of travel that we need to go. Why not do that? And then at that point, I said, look, here's a bear print in the sand. And then,
I remember. Yeah, and we're like, oh, great. And so now there's bears again. And now we're going to bushwhack in the Devil's Club with the bears. And this day is never going to end.
And then all of a sudden, Rachel looked up and I don't even know how or why she saw what we hadn't seen. And she was like, oh my gosh, you guys, I see a ribbon. And we were
Thank you, God, for the pink tag of life.
Yes, we were just like, oh my gosh, a ribbon. And so there it was. And it just, honestly, none of us had looked back. Like when we crossed the river, we should have turned around and been like, that's what it looks like there.
Yeah.
But instead we were like thinking in our head about how, we were going to go across the sand.
And you mean when we crossed the river the day before?
Yeah. Yeah, the day before we hadn't looked back and said like, well, that's what that's going to look like from this vantage point versus how it looks when you cross over. And so honestly, I mean, we're just like eternally grateful to Rachel and her ribbon sighting skills. And man, we had wandered for so long and I was just, again, gearing up to full bushwhack downstream. And I think honestly, probably it would have worked out okay because the trail comes into a little bit closer view of the stream as it curves on further. But I think it would have just been incredibly miserable. And thankfully, Rachel saved us from that. So we crossed and then we still hadn't had lunch at that point. But I think it was probably like, oh my gosh, I looked at my phone earlier. It was 4:15 p.m. So we were like, well, we have to just sit and put a little sustenance in because, of course, at that point, Molly's like, well, it's just 10 more miles for the day or maybe 11. And I was like, what? 11? Yeah, and like 3,000 feet of gain. I'm like, oh, okay. And so suddenly I had that little piece of information. And so we sat and we had a little break, kind of regrouped ourselves.
I remember those goldfish crackers that I ate. They really just tasted amazing. And also another one of the days where we were consuming so much water. And when we'd been wandering in the sandbar and, tree jumble area, we ran out of water. Obviously, there was a river there, so we could refill any time. So when we finally crossed it, we filtered everything. And then we just knew like, oh my gosh, like we got to enjoy sitting here for just a second because we have a long distance to go before we get to our campsite, and all of a sudden realized that we had to go quite a ways uphill.
So that's why my name for this day was Graybeal's Revenge, the Revenge of Graybeal, because here we thought that we had it all figured out and everything was going to be all good, but in the end, Graybeal got his revenge. So once we'd gone there, our next exciting stop was going to be the cable car. And we were like, okay, there's this really cool thing. I don't think we've discussed it yet. So basically all the bridges, get washed out. But there's this one creek crossing, or the Chilliwack River, actually, I believe it is, where they have made a cable car, they call it. So it's this little car that hangs above the river and you pull yourself across it via the rope. And it's so cool. I was looking forward to it the whole time. It can fit 2 people and your packs. And so that was kind of our next little thing that we had to look forward to. So basically, we just trucked on there. I think it was about 2 hours later that we got there. So maybe about 4 more miles because the going was a little bit better. All of it was very cleared of down deadfall, I would say. So we were able to just keep walking.
And also, even though we knew we were going to gain like 3,000 feet of elevation, this area of the trail was especially level. And it was nice because we could make good time. But also in the back of your mind, you're like, oh no, I thought we were going to gain like 3,000 feet over 10 miles. And now every mile that we're chugging away is not much gain. So we're saving that all for the end. That's going to be great, right?
And honestly, I was starting to feel pretty good. Like it was like, the light was filtering in a way that I liked. It was a beautiful forest. Yeah. It was kind of open. It's the kind that I like. I feel like there's kind of some weird mining equipment. I feel like I saw some rusty metal in a couple spots, which is kind of just interesting. Keeps your mind, fresh. Definitely walked through a lot of cobwebs. Face first for sure. Because I was in the lead. Anyway, and then we finally kind of started going up because you have to go up to the dock, which is kind of an insult to injury, right? It's like you can see across the river, but it's like, now I've got to gain some elevation just for the purpose of taking this cable car. But we went up there and it was just so cool. We kind of pulled it across because I think it was on the other side. And then did Rachel go first? I think Rachel went first and
we were scared.
She was honestly a trooper. I was like, look, I have no upper body strength at that time. So I was like, I'm not going to be the solo one because I read things that were like, it's so hard to pull yourself across, which I didn't think it was. Did you?
Well, we were also working together as a team, Carrie.
Okay, well, maybe you picked up more of the slack.
It wasn't bad.
Yeah, honestly, I think probably you could do it as a solo person, but I was like, what if I get to the middle of the river and I can't pull myself across?
And you can't get back.
I can't get back. It's just like, well, guys, I guess I'll be here.
I live here now on the cable car above the river.
In Shelvin. So anyway, you get to go across on this cable car, and that was such a highlight. Each of us stopped in the middle of the river and just looked down, and it's really cool. And then we pulled ourselves up to the platform, and I looked. This took us 20 minutes to do that. Yeah, so it's like, even though you don't have to add in the time for like finding a crossing, switching shoes if you want to, going across, it's like it still took 20 minutes. And then honestly came the sketchiest part, which I would say was climbing down. There was like this rickety ladder that you climb down. Maybe it's relatively nice, but you have to climb down it, and the rungs are awkwardly spaced. And of course I've got like my trekking poles in one hand, and it probably is 10 feet up.
Oh, I think it's more like 20 to 25 feet high. And I'm like, oh shoot, like I'm still, a good 15 miles from a place where you could drive a car. Like, I hope I don't fall on this ladder and then we have a real adventure. But I was going to say, when I was looking into this trail, I saw a lot of pictures of the cable car, and I thought it kind of looked funny. Like, why are all these people taking all these pictures? But it's really, really cool. And doing it in person was even cooler than like the pictures. That they didn't really do it justice. So it'd be even a fun, I don't know. I don't think you could do a day hike to get there per se, but if you were doing like a 1 or 2 night trip just in that Copper Ridge area, it would be definitely worth a little side trip to what?
I said, first of all, don't do that. I just think 1 or 2 days and you go down to the river. What a nightmare.
Well, what if you just went into like boundary camp because you got one night and you're just going to enjoy the park, and then you go 2,000 feet down to the river just to see the cable car. Okay. You can make your own decisions, but it's cool. If you're there, check it out.
Yeah, do whatever you want. Anyway, so yes, you can do that. I don't think I would ever recommend that. I'm just like, that's such a tough trail.
Okay, if you just really love the cable car idea and you want to base your entire trip on seeing a cable car, I don't know of any other ones in the area.
Okay, that's true. Okay, so if you want a cable car centered itinerary, yes, go ahead and do it. Otherwise, that part, it was nice for us, but I wouldn't say like it was anything to write home about. So now we've made it down the platform, and I was kind of like, woo, it's so close to camp, because in my mind that was really close to camp. And I think that Molly was like, oh, there's actually, was it 4 or 6 miles? Molly's like, yeah, so, and it's getting late. It's 6:15 p.m. when we get off the platform. And I was kind of like, all right, guys, just a couple miles till camp. And Molly was like, so it's 6 miles and 2,000 feet of elevation gain. And I feel like my jaw just dropped. I was like, what? And I think that's probably where the pain cave really started, because I always talk about when you just get all screwed up in the head, kind of like when something really throws you off. That threw me off. I was not expecting that. I was already so tired. I was hot. I'd worked hard all day. And like, now we were going to go 6 miles and gain elevation. So then I think I was just like rage hiking. Not that I was mad at anyone. I was just like, gotta keep going, because I don't want to be out here and it's going to be so late. And we even started discussing, like, even though it wasn't on our permit, we were like, maybe we need to just stay at U.S. Cabin Camp or something, which fortunately that area of the trail had even been recently cleared by trail crews, probably the ones that I moved and got stung by stinging nettle for. Yeah. And so, like, it was beautiful in that area. Honestly, had we been there 3 days earlier, we probably would have been just stung by stinging nettle continuously. So we were able to make really good time. But in my mind, I kept thinking, like, okay, this was flat. This mile was flat. How come there was no elevation gain? And then it was like the next mile. Okay, this mile was relatively flat. How come there was no elevation gain? And then finally we started going uphill, and it just felt so steep and so miserable. But like, I knew in my mind, like, there's no other option. You just have to keep going. And I didn't have blisters or anything. I just was like exhausted. Like, I was looking at my watch, and I was burning like 4,500 to 5,200 calories a day. I was just like spent. And here we were still going. And so, I think there was one time that we stopped and I like used the bathroom, and I'm like, let's get back on trail. I peed my like 1 tablespoon for the day. And so, we just had to keep pushing and pushing, and it felt so horrible the last couple of miles. Like, I remember there was a tiny bit of beautiful scenery, because like it was actually, you climbed high. It was like you were getting to be on the ridge again. So then there was these cool views and a couple waterfalls that you could see.
Oh, yeah,
but like all I could think was like, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot. And I would have like some gummies whenever I was like truly crashing. And then I think it was 9:20 p.m. that there's a picture of us nearing our campsite.
And at that point I was like, is this when the cougars come out to play? But yeah, fortunately we finally got to this clearing, and we were getting close to boundary camp, and I think the sun had probably already set and it was just like dusk. And so, yeah, we had made it to camp. We survived. So dusk was coming fast and we needed more water. Of course, there's no water directly at the camp, but you have to walk, a couple hundred yards back the trail to get to the place where a creek crosses. And so even though the cougars were out, it's evening, I somehow was selected to go by myself to get water for everyone while Carrie and Rachel put up the tents. So I did that, and I remember pausing for a moment and just enjoying the evening and then feeling a little bit of the heebie-jeebies and kind of rushing back to camp. And I arrived, and Carrie and Rachel were putting up the tents.
Wow, so now I know that you were just lollygagging is what you just said. You were just standing around and Rachel and I were working.
A person has to enjoy the scenery while they take the time to filter everyone's water for them.
So Molly and I don't really fight on trail, I would say, but I would say we kind of sometimes like pick at each other when we're really just like annoyed and tired.
Especially after 4 days of just like 9 to 12 hours of hiking every single day.
Yeah. These are just like such massive days. So I feel like sometimes this would be an example of if you ever been like, oh, how do you guys fight? This would be it. So Rachel and I are setting up our tents, and it was an awkward campsite where our tents had to be pretty close together. Like you could just barely squeeze 2 tents in. And so Rachel helped me set up mine. I helped her set up hers. But when we were driving in one of the stakes, there was literally a log at the full extension of it. So I was like, oh, no big deal. We'll just have like one side be a little floppy and it won't be an issue. But I knew that when Molly...
Yes. Did you really?
Yes. And I was like, I'm not going to make a big issue of it because Rachel's helping me. And I'm not going to be like, well, we got to redo the entire tent because Molly might not like how this is pitched. But I thought to myself, oh, she is not going to like how this looks when she comes back. She is not going to like it. And so, we set up the tents and we're trying to get stuff ready for dinner. And Molly comes back and she's like, what did you say? Something like, she doesn't say anything. I see her like, look at the tent. She looks at the tent. And finally, about like 30 seconds later, she's like, so are we going to just leave our tent like that sagging on one side? Or did you notice that? And I was like, yes, I did notice that, but it's driven into a log.
And I was like, when I saw the tent looking all droopy like that, I knew I shouldn't say anything. So I held it in as long as I could. But I just couldn't stop myself because it was just so droopy and I couldn't believe that they had set it up that way.
And I just when we talked about this later in the car, when we were talking about our little bit of picking at each other, I was like, yeah, it was so funny because I could just see you didn't like it. And she's like, yeah, I just was going to hold it in for as long as I possibly could. And I swear it could not have been even a full minute that passed from when she came back to camp and saw our tent. So that was just something what we always laugh about, how we kind of had to have that little like moment.
I waited as long as I could.
Yeah.
I thought I was never going to say something, but it turns out after about 30 seconds, I couldn't control it anymore.
So then we just had a honestly very pleasant dinner. I think
I don't even know what we had.
I don't know. We knew that the worst was over. So it was kind of like, okay, let's just eat our dinner and then go to bed literally as soon as possible. There was a guy who came. He had a climbing helmet, remember? So I don't know what his objective was. I wish I would have asked him. But he camped lower than us, which was good because we almost had like split our tents. But he just cowboy camped. He was like, I'm tired. I'm just going to bed.
Yeah.
And then
a theme of everyone in the North Cascades.
Yeah, especially that trail particularly. There's some nicer ones other places, I'm sure, but by and large, they've always been a lot more rugged than like Yosemite campsite type of thing. Yeah. Which it's just a different ecological area. Anyway, so yeah, we packed up our stuff for the night. We got everything ready for bed. I don't even know if we ever found the toilet there, though.
Oh, we did. Yeah, we took a trip there. So you had to actually go up the hill quite a ways into, the North Cascades is funny because it's signs where you should go with these metal or these wooden posts. And then like one side will have a toilet carved, or they just put a moon. Yeah. And then another one will have like a tent and an area for cooking, perhaps if they have a designated area, and then like water. So there's like this post and it looks like you have to go up the hill. And I think Rachel she was like, I'm not going to the bathroom tonight. But Carrie and I, we had to check it out because we like to do that apparently. Some people like cable cars. We like to look at backcountry toilets.
I have to know where it is for the morning.
Yeah, no point in feeling frantic and searching. So we went up there, and I remember it was like really creepy. Like the forest just felt so dark because it was totally pitch black and, night at this point. And I remember like, waiting for Carrie and being like, I wish I could just stand right there next to her because I feel like we need strength in numbers.
But anyway, yeah, we made our little foray. I remember the stars were pretty that night, so that was nice. And then we got in bed, and I think about 1 second later, I was dead asleep. I mean, fully sleeping. And I slept so hard that night. I mean, yeah, that was a tough day. I was deep in the pain cave, but I made it out, and I made it to camp. So we made it. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
As always, if you want to see any photos of like a cable car or videos, you can follow us on Facebook or Instagram where we post those things. And as always, if you enjoy what you're listening to, you can feel free to give it a rating or a review, or don't do it because we don't tell you what to do. Do your own research on rating and reviews. No, I'm just kidding. Do your own research on everything. But thank you guys so much for listening. We appreciate it. And we hope that you're enjoying this. I mean, tomorrow is going to be next week will be the last week that we even talk about the Copper Ridge Loop. So I hope you guys have enjoyed it because that was honestly such a major trip for us. And I hope that some of you guys get to do it someday and tell us how it goes. So thank you so much.
Bye.